Hi, I'm Eric Voss, and now that Game of Thrones Season 7 is complete, we're left wondering where things are headed for the final season. How will Game of Thrones end? Now, based on some clues from this past season and some things set up in the books, and my general understanding of how stories are plotted based off of my own crazy writing, I got some hot predictions. And I don't mean to brag, but right after Season 6 ended, I did one of these predictions videos for Season 7, which was surprisingly accurate. I'm gonna call it here. I predict that by the end of Season 7, we're gonna see the White Walkers tear down that wall. In fact, I'll go as far to say that it will be the closing image of the season. Hey, not bad. Wait, just don't show all the shit that I got wrong. I think next season will show the completion of Arya's arc and her death. Can't win them all. With that said, in case any of these educated shots in the dark end up being dead on for Season 8, spoiler warning. Okay, first, a quick update on the timeline. Unconfirmed reports are saying that Season 8 will begin shooting in October and last through August 2018? Yikes, that would mean the final season probably wouldn't air until 2019. But that also means the scripts for Season 8 almost certainly have not been written yet. Yes, the season has rumored to have been generally outlined at this point, but any leaked, detailed plot summaries that claim to know who says what to whom in each scene are probably just fan fiction. Either way, it sounds like Season 8 will be composed of 6 episodes, maybe each being like an 80-minute movie. That's a lot of story. So let's start with my first prediction of what'll happen during that season. Cities will burn, and they'll burn blue. The Night King and his dragon will continue on this path of destruction from the wall to lay waste to the major cities of Westeros. I mean, guys, that's the promise the show made with these final images of Season 7. The wall falling is like a dam bursting, nothing is safe. And yeah, the Night King doesn't have any of the moral conscience that Daenerys has. Like, he doesn't need to win over the hearts and minds of Westeros. He can just go about killing and converting them the old way. Now, as for where he'll go next, past episodes have given us a few hints, like the Season 7 premiere.
If they breach the wall, the first 2 castles in their path are Last Hearth and Carhold.
Now, we've never seen Last Hearth and Carhold on the show before, so I feel like seeing them get destroyed wouldn't be too cathartic. I feel like with 6 episodes left, they're gonna spend that visual effects money on nuking some more familiar places. So actually, let's look back at the last words that Jon spoke to Ed at Castle Black.
Don't knock it down while I'm gone.
Yeah, I think Castle Black might actually be the Night King's next move. Beyond that, things probably aren't looking too good for Winterfell. But I don't think it will go down without a fight. More on that later. Then, also in Season 6, Bran's mysterious three-eyed raven visions included this shot of a dragon's shadow over the roofs of King's Landing. Now, every other image from that vision was accounted for. And even if this was a shadow of Daenerys' dragons when she recently arrived at the Dragon Pit Summit last episode, I think we would have seen this shot, but we didn't. So I think this shadow will end up belonging to the Night King's dragon as they destroy King's Landing. This show has been teasing us with an attack on King's Landing since the beginning. Stannis' failed invasion, all the recent preparations for the siege, and I think the final act of Game of Thrones will turn this familiar sanctuary upside down. Kind of like how the final battle of the Harry Potter series went down in the Hogwarts Castle School. That would turn the Red Keep into that Harrenhal-like ruin that Daenerys saw in her vision in Season 2. Now, it wouldn't look exactly like that because remember, Cersei replaced that 7-pointed star window with a Lannister lion. I actually think Daenerys' vision was more metaphorical than literal, but this is a general idea. The other city I think might burn is Old Town. Eberron and those other maesters seemed pretty arrogant about the threat of the White Walkers.
A crippled boy claims to have seen dead men on the march beyond the wall, thanks to the magical help of a raven with 3 eyes.
And Archmaester Eberron probably shouldn't have placed his bet so firmly on the wall.
The wall has stood through it all, and every winter that ever came has ended.
Now, in my past breakdowns, I pointed out how the Citadel of Old Town might be inspired by the ancient library of Alexandria, which famously burned along with countless sources of knowledge about the ancient world. So I think it could be really fun to shut up these old maesters with the shadow of the Night King's dragon, kind of like those old men playing chess in Independence Day. If King's Landing gets destroyed, what will that mean for Cersei? Let's actually move on to my next prediction. Cersei will end tragically. After going back and forth on Cersei, the ending of Season 6 and Season 7 have pretty much stripped away all of Cersei's moral finery down to something simple and true. Cersei has no heart. She's Game of Thrones' true human villain. And actually, considering how closely Cersei's life has followed the prophecy she received as a girl,
the king will have 20 children, and you will have 3. That doesn't make sense.
Gold will be their crowns. Gold. Their shrouds.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance Cersei's pregnancy won't come to term. And as sad as that would be, and we really shouldn't wish for that to happen, a miscarriage would be one final thing that drives Cersei over the edge to become the Mad Queen. Now, in our last breakdown, Philip and I discussed how Cersei and Jaime's relationship was inspired by Shakespeare's tragedy Antony and Cleopatra, with Cersei as the complex queen. Now, spoiler alert for that 400-year-old play, but in the end, Cleopatra kills herself with the poison of an asp. Remember, in season 2, Cersei nearly poisoned herself while sitting on the Iron Throne with Tommen bracing for the end. I could see this Mad Queen returning to that rock-bottom state, refusing to let the White Walkers take her in the snowy ruins of the Red Keep. It's also possible that the show will end up following through on that Valancourt theory that Jaime will end up murdering his sister. Now, I went into Jaime's possible endgame in another video, but no matter what, I think Cersei is clearly a tragic figure. But I could also see the show making her more of the main final villain that the heroes have to face, not the Night King. I mean, let's be honest, we still don't know what the Night King wants. And hell, maybe we'll never know. Like, he could simply remain this ice zombie force of nature. Now, if that's the case, maybe the show will kill him off early. Now, I know that could seem like a betrayal to the show, but really, George R.R. Martin established this series as a political drama grounded in real human conflict. Like, Martin has suggested that he wanted A Song of Ice and Fire to be different from the Tolkien Lord of the Rings model of a war for the fate of civilization and the future of humanity, and the shocking deaths of Ned Stark and Robb Stark and Catelyn Stark are all part of that. George R. R. Martin intended actions to have consequences. Anyone can die. And yeah, that goes for characters we identify as pure heroes, and maybe the characters we identify as pure villains. That said, I do think Game of Thrones, the series, has evolved past that, in these recent seasons at least, becoming more of a series driven by divine intervention. I just think they're gonna ground it more than we expect, and bring some of this supernatural mystery into the light. And that leads me to my next prediction about the Night King. I think in the final season, the Night King's goal will be revealed. Not only that, I think the show has already started to tell us. Okay, so just like how season 5 began with a pre-credits cold open scene showing Cersei as a girl learning her prophecy, I predict season 8 will open with another flashback scene that gives us information about the other villain of the series, the Night King. But in this case, it'll be witnessed by Bran. Bran has already witnessed past events like the creation of the Night King, the Tower of Joy, the wedding of Rhaegar and Lyanna. There are actually a ton of other famous events I would love to see dramatized on this show. Battle of the Trident, the Tourney of Harrenhal. But one essential memory to the wars to come could be the Pact. Now, the Pact was the peace agreement between the First Men and the Children of the Forest thousands of years ago. It took place on the Isle of Faces, the island covered in weirwood trees on the God's Eye Lake in the middle of Westeros. I think we're gonna see this, and during the scene, these ancient figures will explain what the Night King wants. Revenge against the Children of the Forest for creating him and dooming him to a life of torment. So we're gonna see them decide to build the wall to banish him north of the realm, praying that he never gets powerful enough to break that seal. But yeah, he will. I think we're also gonna see the Children of the Forest decide to hole up on this island, because, as the most recent episode made a point of clarifying,
Can they swim?
No.
Good.
I actually think the decision to place Jon and his crew on this island in the middle of the frozen lake in episode 6 was meant to visually foreshadow this location in the God's Eye. I think this is also foreshadowed by that scene in episode 4 with Jon and Dany in the cave on Dragonstone. Remember, they saw these cave paintings made by the Children of the Forest with images of the children and the First Men together. And notice the two symbols side by side. I think the bisected circle represents the First Men, which could be why the White Walkers assembled human body parts in that pattern in the first episode. And I think the whorl spiral represents the Children of the Forest, which is why we saw those stones laid out by the Children of the Forest in that shape in season 6. I think these markings were the Children of the Forest's record of the Pact, and this is all setting up Bran witnessing the actual event in season 8. Also, there was that moment in episode 5 when the Maesters brought up the Children of the Forest.
Brings to mind the work of Jenny of Oldstone, the charlatan who claimed descent from the Children of the Forest.
Now, I explained in that breakdown who Jenny of Oldstones is and her connection to the Children of the Forest and the Ghost of Highheart character from the books. And before I move on to my next prediction, the reason we could even make this video, because we can't do all of these for free, is because our friends at Audible are sponsoring it, so huge thanks to them. Audible offers a wide selection of audiobooks and podcasts, and you can get a free audiobook with a 30-day trial by going to audible.com/newrockstars. I actually was reminded of Jenny of Old Stones and The Ghost of High Heart while re-listening to George R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series on Audible. And a new title that I'm about to start to help organize my thoughts and theories about the White Walkers and the Night King is Game of Thrones, The Book of White Walkers. Again, just check out audible.com/newrockstars or click on the link in the description below to start your trial today. Okay, moving on to my next prediction. Let's talk about one of the biggest questions the finale left us with. What's next for the lovebirds of Jon and Daenerys, now that Jon's about to learn that he's actually Aegon Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne, and Dany's nephew? I predict Jon and Dany will not end up together. Okay, stop crying. It was weird that you wanted them to be together. I think the whole purpose of bringing these characters together was simply to produce a child, the Song of Ice and Fire, and that these two parents aren't really meant to grow old together. When asked about how this series would end, George R. R. Martin promised that it would be bittersweet. Now, I read that as, while it may not be a straight-up tragedy, characters won't end up happily ever after. And think about it, Jon and Daenerys' partnership has been mostly circumstantial. They're both young leaders with aligned goals and obvious romantic chemistry, but there's no evidence that they have an emotional or platonic connection like Ned and Catelyn had, or even Jaime or Cersei have, as toxic as that is. Now, I'm not certain if the news of Jon's Targaryen lineage will be the one thing to divide them. Like, I'm sure it won't help, but I don't think they're gonna outright turn on each other either. Really, I just don't think both of them will survive the final season. Like, I know they're the main characters, it's just crazy to me that they've made it this far. I think just like Jon's parents didn't survive that war to see their child grow up, I think either Jon or Daenerys, or both, will leave this young Targaryen an orphan. Okay, I said stop crying. I think that's why the recent finale episode shot their sex scene to be so dark and foreboding, with Tyrion's concerned reaction. I think we're meant to see the relationship as doomed. Anyway, I'll come back to this. Since we're talking about family members not really getting along, here's another prediction. I think season 8 will finally deliver a few brother against brother battles that they've been promising. First, honestly, I didn't expect this until last episode, but I think we're gonna see the Hound versus the Mountain, Clegane Bowl. It's on, brothers!
It's not how it ends for you, brother. You know who's coming for you.
Also, second, I think it's inevitable that the dragons will fight each other as well. Drogon and Rhaegal versus Zombie Viserion. I actually think that this battle will be the Battle of Winterfell that I alluded to earlier. An aerial battle between dragon brothers, with Dany on Drogon, the Night King on Viserion, and Jon on Rhaegal. That's right, he's gonna be a dragon rider. Specifically, the dragon named after his father, Rhaegar. Meanwhile, in the south, Cersei mentioned that Euron Greyjoy is bringing the Golden Company from Essos, along with their elephants. And I think the show is setting up this private army from Essos to collide with another private army from Essos, the Unsullied. I guess that kind of makes them brothers? Not really. Now, I would say the Unsullied have better chances in this battle, you know, with the fighting for love and all that. But guys, the Golden Company has freaking elephants. Elephants! Now lastly, among these battles between family members, the finale made it clear that Theon Greyjoy is aiming to rescue his sister Yara. And yeah, that redemption plot puts him on a collision course with his uncle Euron. Now in our breakdown, we went into how the character of Euron might be inspired by Claudius from Shakespeare's Hamlet, the murderous uncle who stole the throne, paranoid that his brother's ghost will come back to seek revenge. And I think that will happen in the form of little Theon, who, like Hamlet, could engage in a bloody scuffle that ends with both him and his uncle dead. Now, when we start talking about who will survive and who won't, it gets a little hard. It all depends on what kind of thematic tone the show will want to take in its final few episodes. Will it want to reward good moral characters by letting them survive, or take a more cynical view and reward characters who are more dastardly and traitorous? In George R. R. Martin's outline for the book series that he submitted decades ago, he originally planned for at least 5 main characters to survive through the end of the series: Jon, Dany, Tyrion, Bran, and Arya. Now, a lot has changed since then. The series went from a trilogy to 7 installments, and I'm assuming Game of Thrones season 7 and 8 are gonna be pretty different from The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, so there's a good chance they won't stick to this. And other than the death predictions I've already made in this video, I'm gonna hold off on who lives and who dies for the rest of the cast. I'll probably do another video on that, but for now, let's move on to the big question. How will Game of Thrones end? What will be the final scene? Now, the closing image of a television series is almost always a huge deal. It's actually why we spend so much time in all of our breakdowns analyzing the themes and possible symbolism of each opening and closing image. So what will be the final shot that we see before the credits roll on Game of Thrones? Will it be satisfying? Now, as I said before, George R. R. Martin promised the ending would be bittersweet. Some fans have speculated that the series will end by revealing all of these events are a story within a story, written by Samwell Tarly as part of a new history manuscript of Westeros. In fact, there was a scene this past season that might have hinted at that.
What would you call it then?
Possibly something a bit more poetic?
Now, the theory there was that Sam's future history book will be poetically titled A Song of Ice and Fire. This would be similar to that moment in the Lord of the Rings movies when we see Bilbo Baggins' manuscript for There and Back Again, which is the exact story of The Hobbit. It's also kind of like the final scene of the sitcom Roseanne, which featured her in a twist finishing a book that was actually just the fictional story of the final crazy season of that show. Now, I could see the final season of Game of Thrones hinting at this possibility with Sam writing all these events in a book, but I don't think it'll be the final image. So here's my prediction. The title of George R. R. Martin's planned 7th book is A Dream of Spring. And just like The Winds of Winter was the title of the finale episode of season 6, I think A Dream of Spring will be the title of one of the season 8 episodes, maybe the series finale. So what does A Dream of Spring refer to? Now, some have suggested that all of the events from the books in the show could be a dream, a vision in Bran's mind, with the final shot of the show being him waking up in his bed in Winterfell. Honestly, I would hate that. The only time that has worked was on the sitcom Newhart, which ended up waking up from a dream that was on the previous sitcom he was on, Bob Newhart Show. And I guess it also worked in that parody that Bryan Cranston did of that, with Breaking Bad all being a nightmare from Hal, the dad from Malcolm in the Middle. I actually think A Dream of Spring could refer to Jon and Daenerys' child, a winter baby who sleeps and dreams of the promise of spring. And here's my out on a limb theory on this. Imagine an end to Game of Thrones' final season in which the Night King and Cersei are defeated, but Daenerys dies, perhaps in childbirth, leaving her baby to be cared after by Jon, aka Aegon Targaryen, who gently rocks his child to sleep as he or she dreams of spring. Or, even bittersweeter, imagine both Daenerys and Jon have died. Like maybe Jon won't have survived his one-on-one combat with the Night King, which the show definitely seems to be setting up. Instead, this baby has to be cared after by another. Perhaps Samwell Tarly or Gilly. And the final image could be Sam singing a lullaby to lull this baby to sleep, a song of ice and fire. Oh God, that's too violent, Sam. That is not an appropriate story for a baby. Or, the bittersweetest, maybe the reason Daenerys would die in childbirth is because there's a complication with the pregnancy, which would be a known risk with children who are the products of incest, and the baby is revealed to be a dwarf. That would leave Tyrion Lannister, hand to the queen, and now King Regent, looking after this orphan child, a song of ice and fire who dreams of spring. Huh? Too crazy? Yeah, probably. We will have plenty of time to dream of spring between now and 2019 and make even more theory and prediction videos about what will happen to the likes of Arya and the Hound and Jorah Mormont and Brienne and Ghost. Where the hell has that direwolf been? What do you think A Dream of Spring means? Will Cersei or the Night King be the bigger villain in the final season? And what do you think the Night King wants? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and tweet me directly at EAVOS or at New Rockstars. Share this video and subscribe to New Rockstars to see all of our many other Game of Thrones videos. And if you want to help us make more videos, you can contribute to us on Patreon. Big thanks to all of our donors, especially Pony Stark. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.